everyone, welcome to Embracing Your Season. My name is Paige Klingenpeel and I am your host. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have another amazing guest and we're going to be talking about something interesting, midlife crisis. Anybody else out there relate to this? So I am 43 years old, years young, maybe. How do people say it? I literally have never had a problem introducing my age. I just feel like it's something I have lived the amount of years, and I'm going to represent those well. But there is something for women that when we hit this stage of 40s, for instance, that people refer to it as midlife or middle age. I remember I had a coworker after my birthday and be like, wow, you're middle aged now. I literally wanted to punch him in the jugular, like right in the throat punch. It had such a visceral response for me. Like I was angry to be called middle age, but why? I mean, that's reality. It's true. I'm 43. Supposedly that in terms of the lifespan that Americans have these days, that is middle age. Women, there is something about this culture that for a middle-aged woman that we look differently upon them. And so now I'm taking all of these cultural cues and trying to figure out, is my life half lived? What am I going to do with the rest of the half of my life? Well, that's kind of my conversation today. I'm looking so forward for you guys to meet Sarah Bragg. She has written a book called Is Everyone Happier Than Me? An honest guide to the questions that keep you up at night. She's also a podcast host for Surviving Sarah. I listened to it this morning. She has some great conversations on there. But today's conversation, again, is about happiness, our roles as being midlife. Again, with me having 4 kids, I'm in the season of I am a full-time mama. I'm a full-time pastor. I'm a full-time wife. But sometimes those questions do keep me up at night of what I'm going to do in the future. What am I going to do once my kids leave? Have I lived my life to the fullest? So I know that you're going to enjoy this conversation again with Sarah Bragg. So join me now on another episode of Embracing Your Season. Well, Sarah, I'm so happy that you're joining us today. Thanks for having this conversation with me. So you wrote a book about being middle-aged. And again, this terminology, it hits me. It hits me raw, like to the point where I had a coworker referred to me as middle-aged as I just turned 43 in May. And I was like, I wanted to hit him. There was violence in my demeanor. So tell us a little bit more of like at night, we're thinking
Right.
through some of these fears of being at this age. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things as I don't know, talk to friends and talk to other women, we're all waking up in the middle of the night, which I guess, again, this must be that stage of life
Yep, exactly.
that we wake up no matter like how well I eat or all the things, I still am going to wake up at 3 a.m. And so I tend to at this season, I don't know, I like to do a lot of mental aerobics at that time of night. I think this is just the best time to really ruminate on these things.
Yeah.
And so I just found that it's very much what you just said. Like you've lived all this life. For many of us, maybe we've worked in a certain field for a long time. Maybe you've been in a relationship for a long time. Maybe if you're a parent, you've been kind of parenting at this for a little bit. And you just are sort of like, so this is it? Like I thought I was going to be somewhere else by this point. I thought life would look a little bit different. And so I just started really writing about it. And in fact, when I was sitting with my therapist one day and she said, "How are you feeling about the book?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And she's like, "Well, remind me again what it's about." And I told her, she's like, "Oh, well, no wonder you feel a little nervous. Like that's basically our therapy sessions that you're putting out into public, to consume." And so I just wanted to write in a way that I don't want other women to feel like they're the only lonely ones or the only crazy ones or the only ones feeling like, what is this it? Like, I'm not very happy. Am I supposed to be happier right now? It seems like everyone else is. What is going on in this season of life? And so this book is really sort of a snapshot of the last several years of my life as I've stepped into the midlife phase and wrestling with a lot of the questions around identity and worth and purpose. and value. Just really, basically, I'm a middle school girl all over again. Is what it feels like.
But with so much more beauty and grace, right? Like,
Okay,
and
okay, we'll take
wisdom.
it.
Yes, that's the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I love how society talks about how do you identify, and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I identify as a 20-year-old something that is much wiser. It's like
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
relate to my age, and yet then there are days I wake up and I'm like, my body aches everywhere, my brain, I'm forgetting things I've always known, and so there is
Yeah.
that correlation of I need to accept that reality is I'm
Gosh.
getting older, and especially when
Radical
you have
acceptance.
kids.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
girl,
trying.
yes. Pull some of that DBT out. Exactly
Oh,
right. Yeah, we do that. We have to accept that. And especially when we have kids in our home too, it's like they are a mirror to our realities that we are just not where
yeah.
we used to be. And that's okay. But let's go back to the word happiness. I know that's one of the things that you're endeavoring on, and this is part of it written in your book. So tell us a little bit about more of your search to find
Yeah.
happiness.
Well, again, as I, pondered things in the middle of the night, and we had just really come out of, 2020. In the middle of 2020, we moved states. We moved back to my hometown. We moved from like tiny home onto like property. All these things that people are like, oh gosh. And this was the question they kept asking me: are you just so happy?
Hmm.
And I just like lied through my teeth and was like, yes. And deep inside, I was like, no, I'm not happy. I left the community I loved. I left job opportunities. I like it just everything sort of like came crashing in at that moment about happiness and of going everything that I wanted, I just left behind in pursuit of something else. I don't even know if happiness was what I was pursuing, but I thought I just knew it was the right next step. And
Hmm.
I knew it was going to be hard. And so but I just missed being happy. And so I really started thinking a lot about that, reading a lot about that, listening to a lot of podcasts or books about that. And what I really started finding was that happiness really comes down to connection. And so that's really the root of our happiness is our connection. And so I just started looking at my life and I started looking at all the questions I was asking and all the feelings that I was feeling sort of associated with these questions. And I started looking for connection, connection to myself, connection to others, connection to God, your faith, and just really started asking all those questions, but in light of connection. And that is really where the heart of my book is really kind of it's a guide. It's not necessarily a simple 3-step guide, but it's more of a hey, here's what helped me find connection in regards to purpose or connection in regards to my identity or connection in regards to just my friends. This is really what helped me find more connection, which ultimately helps me feel a little more happy about
Hmm.
who I am and where I am.
Hmm. So it's almost like happiness became an overflow,
Yeah.
right? That was initially what led you. That was the catalyst that led you to
Right.
pursue some of these things, but connection. And then coming off of 2020, when we really only had the connection of with the people that we lived in the household with, we
Right.
lost all of these relationships. So I'm curious to know more about, you mentioned connection with self. So what did that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah. Well, I think I am my own worst critic. I
Hmm.
am the hardest on myself. And so I do feel like connecting with myself is probably one of the hardest things for me. I can connect with others very easily. I can see the good in others very easily, but the good in myself that's a little bit harder. So I feel like for me it was one of the biggest things that I learned to connect with myself again about was play, like doing something that I simply enjoyed for the sheer pleasure of enjoyment. And that's one of the things that I think that, especially in this stage of life, we don't play anymore. And
Hmm.
so that was one of the ways to really connect with myself was to go, I need to play again. Well, what did I like to do growing up? That was the first place I went to. Yeah, I played tennis all through adolescence. I played in college. And then it was like I sort of graduated from college and graduated from tennis for whatever reason. I think part of it was like, oh, you're a grown up now. You're supposed to like go to work, you do these things, and you don't have time to play. And I went back to tennis and I played like 3 times a week, and it is the most life-giving thing is to just play, just to have fun, just to show up and do something for the sake of play. And
Hmm.
I think by doing that, I've really connected with myself again of like, oh yeah, this is who I am. This is something about me that brings me a lot of happiness, that brings me um, closer to who I have always been. And so I think that's something that a lot of us at this age are missing. I just threw that out on social media yesterday. What do you do for active relaxation? And I
Hmm.
had several people say, I don't know. Like, I
Yeah.
don't have an answer. Because I think a lot of us, again, we make sure our kids have hobbies. We make sure our kids have time to play. We spend a lot of money doing that. And we just don't do it for ourselves. But we're just grown up kids. We need the same things that our kids need.
And that makes me think the reason why this season for women, maybe particularly, is so hard when you hit that place where your kids no longer need you to the same degree that they did when they were younger, is that we've lost some of our identity because it's been so wrapped up in our role as a mother, as a spouse. And then if we're working outside of the home, what our role was there. And so also when someone asks us what our hobbies are, when we're filling out some like random application, we're like, I literally don't know. And
Right,
how
right,
scary that is
right.
for us.
Right. I mean that question alone, I can remember going, I don't know. Like sometimes I walk. Like I don't know. Like
I
that sounds
know.
so lame to like
Yeah.
walking's my hobby, but it can be. But I just felt like, what do I put in that question box? But I think that's one thing that I feel like a dial that I've turned up in my life over the last few years is just finding what lights me up.
Hmm. Mhm.
Reading books. I love reading fiction. I love it. I
Mhm.
used to never read fiction because I felt like, you have to like be learning something at all times if you're going to read, right? And so I would read nonfiction all the time. And of course, newsflash, you learn a lot by reading fiction too. There's a whole wealth of things we learn. But I feel like I've just turned into a book nerd, and I love it. Like this
Yeah.
is who I am. I love escaping in a story, and that's another hobby. So I feel like that is something we need to turn back to, is finding some things that sort of light us up.
Mhm. And you had a really great prompt with that is like, what did you like to used to do? Like, what did you
Yeah.
enjoy doing when you were younger? Because that's when our roles were different, when we could truly think about ourselves. I mean, our kids, we know they're super selfish, but they also show us how to focus on ourselves and meeting our own needs. So why don't we go
Yeah.
back to that inner child and be like, what did you like doing? And then making margin, setting that aside and saying, I need to do those things. Because what we then find is that we can then pour out to our kids a different level of energy and love and even commitment because now I'm taking care of myself. I just think
Yeah.
that's so valuable for
Yeah.
sure. Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
So I would love to go back to the other side of like that fear dynamic of like you are in this season where you're like, man, half my life is up. So what are some of the fears
Mhm.
that you started researching or even just you started journaling about that led to
Yeah.
this book for you?
Well, I feel like so much of the fears, there's a lot of regret of going, well, if the road not taken, oh, if I had just gone this way, what would life have been like? Or, there's those kind of fears of just sort of not making peace with the past, and really peace with the future, as well. I feel like I live in the future a lot. And by doing that, you just forget what's in front of you. So I have
Mm.
to work on that. But I have a lot of fears around my family, like, oh my gosh, what if we're messing these kids up? Like, you and I kind of talked about that offline.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot to that. What if I'm doing this all wrong? What if they
Mhm.
hate me? What if we have no relationship when they're an adult? And
Mhm.
so you carry a lot of that because all of a sudden you realize, there's just more at stake. It feels like the older you're getting, the closer you see, the end, and the closer
Mhm.
you see your kids. They're no longer just 5, and they're just they're gonna see you as their mom, and now they're going, oh, my mom's this flawed human. How do I feel about that? Like it's all these. So I feel like there's a lot of fears of that. Will they be okay?
Mm.
And so I do feel like, for me, I think one of a great fear that I always carry is, what's next? Is this it? Like, what am I going to be doing after this? What does the next 5 years look like? I always hate that
Mhm.
question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm like, I don't know. Stop asking me,
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
It's so interesting when we have kids. I mean, those are natural transition seasons for us. We transfer from the infancy to the toddlers to the preschool, school, and so forth. So, my oldest, she's going to be a senior in high school next year. And I'm so excited for her because I just know that there's so much more in store for her. And then we have four kids. So, my youngest is 11. He has a few years before he graduates, but I'm already thinking through like what does life look like when my kids go out? Because that transition is so big. It's so
Yeah.
different. My
Yeah.
role changes completely. My future changes completely. And so it's almost like I'm trying to take those steps now, which I think is what you're even indicating for people is like, take steps now, take care of yourself
Yeah.
so that when you get to that point, like, you know who you are, you still have all these things to rely on. But
Yeah.
any suggestions for that mama who's maybe has a spectrum of ages at their home, like one's getting ready to graduate, one's still in elementary. How do you navigate these roles of finding who you are, even outside of being a parent?
Yeah, that's a lot. I will just say that right off the
Mhm.
bat. That is no easy thing. I don't feel like there's a quick 3-step process. In fact, I wish there was.
I know that's your
Um,
next book,
I
right? You're gonna
know,
find
I
it
know.
out.
The publisher kept going, "So could this be like 3 steps?" I'm like, "No, sorry. Wrong girl, wrong
Yep.
girl." And so, I would say to her, "Just take your time. Take your time and try some things." I think the hard and I said it a second ago in a different way, but being present is really hard for me. And so I can get really looking at the future and getting overwhelmed with, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, what am I going to do with my time? What am I going to do with myself? And then I can look in the past and be full of regrets. "Oh, I wish I'd done this, or if only we hadn't moved, then I'd have this opportunity or whatever." And learning to be present is a big thing for me. So I feel like be present in this stage where you've got one graduating and you've got some younger. You've got time to give and to be present. Yeah, I do that through
Mhm.
journaling with my gratitude. Like, focus, forces me to come in and go, okay, what was good? What made me smile today? What did it look like today?
Mm.
That helps me. It helps me to remember who my kids are, like, in this moment. I often remind myself it won't always be this way. So be here. Going back to playing tennis, I feel like tennis has been a practice in presence for me. Um, I can only think about what's happening on this court at this moment. And if this
Mhm.
ball comes flying at my face, what am I
That's
going to
right.
do? Right. So I feel like that has been a good, like, doing something that helps you practice being present, whether it's
Mm.
meditation or something that helps you be in the moment. I think those are the things that, you can't rush anything, you can't make anything happen, but if you can practice being present and enjoying each phase for what it is, it's easy for us to look back at our girls when they were 2 and 3 and 4 and go, "Oh my gosh, that was such a cute stage," and forget, like, how hard how hard that was.
Yep.
But it came and it went, and so going, "Okay, in this phase," like, I will tell you, 13-year-old girls are not fun. They're not
Mm.
fun, but I love them, and I know that we're gonna only be in this phase for this amount of time, so I'm trying to be present and then escape when I need to escape in healthy ways. Get on the tennis court and,
Yes.
like, just escape the drama for a minute and then come back, but,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I would try to work on if I
Well,
were that mama.
and you mentioned escape, right? So none of us are, unless we have gone to therapy and worked through like
Right.
the fear and the anxiety, like it's very hard to stay present. So we use the escapism. And one of the things that we use is social media. And then we get on there and start comparing. And I know you've addressed this. What are some creative ways that we can combat like comparison?
Oh, it's so hard and it's so easy to get sucked in and it's just so easy to compare. It just is the nature of the game, right?
Hmm.
And so for me, there's been different seasons where I feel like you just have to set up guardrails around it. For me, sometimes that means like completely taking time away, just taking time off of social media. I did that before I wrote the book for about 4 months, and it was interesting. It was strange how many times my finger went to like open the app and the app wasn't there. Like, oh wow, my body is trained to
Yep.
just look
Yep.
for that.
Pavlov's
Um,
dog. That's right.
yes, but then and I just leaned into we're really only designed probably to connect with a handful of people to really
Hmm.
know what's going on in their lives, and so for those people, I was texting with them and calling with them and finding, keeping up with them, even though I didn't know what the other 1,000 people that I could be connected with were doing. I at least knew what these handful of people were doing.
Hmm.
I think sometimes we have to treat ourselves the way that we treat our kids with social media, set time limits. There's been times where I have a 30-minute timer on Instagram or Facebook and it goes off and it's like, you've got, 5 minutes left. I feel like sometimes we have to set that kind of guardrail in place because I think sometimes it's just a lot. Again, it's
Mhm.
the nature of the game. So if you're showing up, you will be enticed to compare. And if you find that it's making you more angsty and less happy and less, peaceful about who you are, your life, then I think that's a real sign to go, I just need a little bit of a break from this
Yeah,
and
that's
take a
so
break.
good. And I think again, we're in this stage where we are looking at our bodies in a different way. We're looking at our season of life in a different way. And so if we have the exposure on social media of so many other people who have
Yeah.
photoshopped or have, just look amazing for their age, we will naturally then start degrading ourselves, speaking lies over ourselves as if it equates our value, and
Yeah.
it just becomes a hot mess. And so setting up some of these guardrails, I think is such a beautiful idea of
Yeah.
really protecting our hearts, but then modeling for our kids as well that this
Yeah.
isn't necessarily a healthy thing to continue to practice
Yeah.
repeatedly over and over again.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and another thing to do is just amp up your in real life time.
Hmm.
It's been really good. I know I keep talking about tennis, but I've had a couple of really good conversations this week with some of the women I play with. And these three women are 65 years old. And so they're 20 years older than me. And it's been so good to look at these women and they're like, your skin will get like wrinkly at some point. Like it's just gonna happen. They're like,
All
it's
the
just
things.
coming. It's just coming. They're like, what I wouldn't give to have your body now. But
Yeah.
it's this like, I don't know, they just have such wisdom of going, and for me to just go, okay, like these are like wonderful women that I'm seeing in real life. I see them, I can touch them. They are aging and they're doing, great active things too. And it's not just what you see on social media.
Hmm.
Like you said, it's really easy to go, well, that woman's 45 and she is like super fit
Yeah.
and like not knowing any of the backstory, not knowing anything else that's going on, it's really easy then for me to then feel bad about who I am and how I look and where I am in life. And so dialing up your in person, in real life people, I think just help keep you in touch with like, I think this is what the majority of real people look like and act
Hmm.
like in the life that they have.
Yeah. And I love the fact that, I mean, you're just modeling this mentor mentee relationship, right? Like you're learning from these older adults who have lived more life, 20 years plus, right? Like
Right.
they have these experiences, which I think could be so helpful. And we miss that in community. And we need to be more intentional of inviting these multi-generational relationships to happen. And they're
Yeah.
not always conducive in some of, even in churches, I mean, in surrounding areas, books clubs, like
Yep.
across the board. We just need to be more intentional about that. So speak to the women out there that may not have a community and they're experiencing
Yeah.
just loneliness. What are
Yeah.
some things that you could suggest or encourage them with?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think you have to be the one to reach out. You have
Mhm.
to, and that's vulnerable and that's scary because someone may like think you're crazy. They may say no. There's a lot of reasons why it's easier to not reach out. But I think that is where we have to start. For one, I think you just mentioned it. Book clubs are such a great thing. I'm a part of two different book clubs here, and I saw a post on like we have like a city Facebook group or whatever, and somebody was saying, "Oh, I've got a virtual book club if anybody wants to join." And I'm just like, it makes me so happy to see people putting themselves out there of going, "Come join me. Here I am." And so I think you find an interest that you have and then sort of look around, see if somebody else has that common interest and go there. I know, not everybody plays tennis, but I feel like everybody is playing pickleball these days. And
Yeah, they are.
for the last 2 years, I have said pickleball is the new church community. It is the
Ooh,
new way to meet people. It is active. You have every generation playing.
yep,
My
yep.
daughter is going out every night at the public parks and playing pickleball. She's 16 and she's playing 65-year-olds and 55-year-olds and all across the board. And I'm like, there it is. This is the community that people are looking for. You don't
Mm.
have to be amazing. It's an easy sport to pick up and try. And for whatever reason, it is really building a sense of community. So even though I don't play pickleball, I play tennis. I, can't hurt my tennis game. But I
Yeah.
keep saying pickleball is a great community builder. And
Hmm.
so I think you just, again, you find an interest and start there and find a commonality somewhere with someone, and be the one to reach out and try to find that.
Man, that's so good. Yeah, and like you said, it's just like we have to be the one that's intentional. And how often that we feel like, oh, they're too busy. We say the no almost for
Yeah.
other people, and so that we never reach out. And how
Yeah.
that limits us from potential connections
Yeah.
and building relationships and just learning and growing from
Yes.
other people. I think there's so much value in that. So
Yes.
speaking of just the midlife, just being overwhelmed maybe with the season, in your book, you talk a little bit about how to it's with grief. There's a
Yeah.
correlation with some grief there. Can you explain a little bit of that connection?
Gosh. I feel like no one prepared me for grief. I still don't do grief well. I feel like this is one of those things that I'm trying that if that's not an Enneagram 3 saying I didn't do it well, I'm trying to achieve grief. I don't know what else shows that I'm an Enneagram 3. Um, but I feel like there's a lot of things that we have to grieve because there's a lot of I feel like at this point you've had enough of a chance to experience some loss, whether that's an actual death, but it could have been, loss of a dream, loss of
That's
a
good.
relationship, loss of an idea of what you thought life was going to be like. There's a lot of loss I feel like that we come alongside at this point in life, and it's learning to look fondly at what was and still feel you can be sad about it, but also not let it overwhelm you to the
Mm,
point of where you just can't get past it. But I feel like that's a lot of it. I'm learning is going, maybe that's part of that. We talked about that acceptance piece is learning to be, it's okay to be sad about that and to feel that and that this is how it is and it's not like it used to be, but that's okay because this is
mhm,
where I am now and it is okay. And you can be sad about that. And so I feel like there's just a lot of grieving that comes alongside with loss at this point in life that we have to learn how to allow ourselves to feel sad. I think
mhm,
for a lot of us, we grew up in those kind of feelings we're not supposed to have. We're not supposed to have anger or sadness, we're supposed to be, happy and joyful and, positive. And no, it's okay to be sad about that. It's okay to get some help navigating that sadness that's around that.
mhm,
That
mhm,
was really the catalyst for me going into therapy a couple of years ago was just dealing with the grief of a loss of who I am at this point and what I wanted to be and where I thought I would be. And I think learning to grieve has been one of the hardest things, but one of the things that it's going, okay, it's okay to be sad about this.
mhm.
We're going to feel that and acknowledge that, and then we're going to keep going.
Yeah. And do you know, I believe that then that connects you to happiness because when you can grieve and you grieve well, you accept and you move on. And then that's where that contentment piece comes from, right? Is like, yes, I can be happy with where I'm at now. Not that it mitigates the grief, not the seasons that you missed out on or potentially what you're grieving, but the fact that I'm here now and I can accept that and move on.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, I would love for people to find your book and all your resources. Listen to your podcast. I listened to it this morning. Again, you're just having great conversations. So, where can people find your resources?
Yes, thank you. Well, the podcast is called Surviving Sarah because I'm just surviving myself over here on all the things. And then the book is called Is Everyone Happier Than Me? And you can find it at any store that you like to buy your books from. It should be there. And then Sarah W. Bragg on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I know it's going to bless a lot of people. So, I appreciate you just sharing all the words today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. Again, thanks for sticking with us when it comes to the audio stuff. Technology is amazing, but sometimes when it doesn't go so great, it can be a little frustrating. However, the content was amazing, was it not? I know that I learned so much from hearing Sarah's story and I can relate. sitting up late at night wondering, am I doing enough? What am I doing to represent myself and bring myself happiness? How are my relationships and how am I finding connection? Like, these are literally things that I have journaled about. And so having this thoughtful conversation with Sarah, I hope also brings and highlights information for you guys and my listeners. So of course, now's the time for some of the takeaways, which I'm sure that you guys caught on to, but there were a few that I really felt like I wanted to hit hard on. The first one, for instance, is happiness is rooted in connection. Did you pick up on that when she said that? The connection with self, connection with others, connection with God, how all of those things are interwoven into happiness. But too often we focus too much on pouring out ourselves constantly, whether it's our family dynamics or our job inside the home or outside the home, that we forget to be connected to ourselves. So I appreciated that she gave some ideas of how do we reconnect. And one of them was learn to play with enjoyment. She mentioned tennis is her thing. Well, what about for you? What as a child did you love doing that maybe you can bring back into the rhythm of your day to day? Maybe it's reading. I know I've really picked back up on reading fiction. So when I was in school or grad school, reading was one of those things where I did it because I needed the grade and I needed to pass. Now I get to read for fun. And it's so funny because my kids know me as readers, and I'll be like, oh, guys, you should totally check out this book. Well, they're in that season where they're like, no, I don't want to read because it's for school and it's boring. But we find that one book. And it's like that time together of us reading this storyline has actually connected us and even brought joy into our relationships. So, what does it look like for you to choose things that bring fun and enjoyment for you? The next takeaway that I have is just be present. So we know that sometimes our behaviors are rooted in fear, especially when we're looking at where we're at in our life. And it doesn't just have to be middle age. It could be like you're in your early 20s, or you just had your first baby, or maybe your kids are out of the home and you're empty nesters now. Being present is the best place to be, because not only is that the season that God has planned for you to be in, but if we focus too much on the future, then we're worrying about things that we have zero control over. That builds anxiety, and that fear becomes dominant. It actually starts impacting our sleep, impacting our gut health, impacting our brain health. It impacts everything on a holistic level when we allow fear, and fear of the future specifically, to dominate our thinking. So, how can you be present today? What are some things that you can express gratitude about? Things that you can celebrate? Maybe connecting with a friend that you haven't spoken to for a while, or sending a quick text to someone that you love, reminding them that you love them dearly. These are ways that we stay in the present, and that actually helps us stay in happiness as well. And then finally, I know that sometimes it is hard to make friendships as an adult. Sarah mentioned how pickleball is a big thing. It's a huge thing here. One of my producers, in fact, is a huge pickleball person. I have seen my friends make mutual acquaintances because of their desire to enter into a pickleball season. Again, I don't fully understand the sport. I'll be honest. Maybe we'll do an episode on that. It looks fun. I'm there just to have fun, although I am a little competitive. So maybe that wouldn't be so great to make friends if I smash that ball and we beat each other. But the point remains, we have to take initiative. We have to take steps to push ourselves into relationships so that we can meet others that we may not normally have engagement with. I love the idea of multi-generational relationships. I learned so much from the women that are older than me. I have chosen to be in mentor relationships. The dynamic or the venue that works best for me is my church. I get to walk alongside some of these women who pour into me, remind me that these are just seasons, that my kids won't always be this way, and that I get to appreciate this moment. But maybe a church isn't the place where you can go for that. Sarah mentioned other things like book clubs, or again, finding a sport, a local community. Facebook, that's one thing you could do, is look up, are there group communities, something that is local for you that you can connect with other people. But friends, it starts with you taking the initiative. And of course, that can lead to fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, whatever it is. But I'm telling you, if you take that step, you will be blessed by a creation of a relationship that you never saw coming. And that can help build connections across the board, as well as bringing health to your own life. So friends, those are my takeaways today from my conversation with Sarah. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I know that you've probably took away your own thoughts. And in fact, I would love to hear them. So if you're interested in hearing a topic or maybe something that you learned today, go ahead and email me at paigeklingenpeel@gmail.com. So join us next time on another episode of Embracing Your Season.